Okay, Mon. Dr. De Vera is here na.
Okay. So can we start, Jeff?
Yes, we've started already and recording na. Go.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the second part of the Palace Essentials of the New Normal. So this afternoon, we'll be discussing the hospital operational preparedness for surgery in the new normal. So to start, may I call on Dr. Mondevera for the invocation?
Okay, good afternoon. Let us pray. Blessed are you, O Lord, our God, King of the universe. We bless your name, O Lord. Truly, indeed, you are a refuge and our strength, a very present help in times of trouble. And because of this, O Lord, you have kept us alive during the 9 weeks of this pandemic. We thank you, Lord, for sustaining us and keeping us alive. Father, our Heavenly Father, we pray for those who are still afflicted with the COVID infection, that your mercy and grace be upon them to heal them. And we thank you, Lord, for those whom you have healed. May they give glory to your name. Our Heavenly Father, we commit this webinar into your hands. We thank you for the different speakers, for their availability. May give them strength and wisdom and the utterance, O Lord, to share their knowledge, O Lord, with us. May you give us success, O Lord, for this webinar, for your glory. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you,
Amen.
Dr. De Vera. To give his welcome remarks, please welcome the President of Palace, Dr. Boytan.
Thank you again, Mon. Good afternoon, everyone. Despite this scorching heat, and a pleasant afternoon to you, Hepe. This is now the new normal webinars. On behalf of Palace, welcome again to the Palace webinar for a cause, Essentials of the New Normal Part 2, with the theme Hospital Operational Preparedness for Surgery in the New Normal. We have to be prepared, ready, and at the same time cautious because of this pandemic. From our home to our workplace, we have to adjust and adapt to the new situation and environment in order to deliver the best quality care to our patients and at the same time protect ourselves, our co-workers, our patients, and our family. With this modified ECQ, I hope and pray the cases of COVID-19 will not shoot up. Our annual convention is fast approaching, and may I remind the chapter presidents, the chairman of the MIS training institutions, and our members to please submit your updated emails to our secretariat, Ms. Cherry. And to those who are not yet updated with their dues, please do so. Once again, let me thank TNP for being with us since the beginning of this webinar for a cause, and to J&J for their continued support. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. President. So to start this session, our first speaker will talk on the directions needed for planning. He is the current president and CEO of St. Luke's Medical Center. Please welcome Dr. Arturo de la Peña.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, Pepe.
Good afternoon.
Yeah,
Afternoon, sir.
even
Good afternoon,
those
sir.
people that I can see,
Hello, sir.
there's a lot of friends hopefully listening and probably for about almost 5 months we have not met with one another. Anyway, I was given three main questions on to answer and probably share with all of the members of PALES. One is, what is the process now in St. Luke's Medical Center in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic? I'm going to start with setup. Nobody is prepared for the COVID-19 pandemic, but what we did as we learned from it, because we put up a COVID center, the first thing that we did was standardize the treatment protocol based on available data. And we were able to dedicate floors and wards solely for COVID patients, diagnostic machines solely for all of these patients. We were able to design a unilateral patient flow, even dedicating elevators for COVID patients. And we dedicated ICUs, operating rooms, personnel. And what was revealing from this particular experience, a lot of doctors went into group practice to be able to lessen their exposure to active COVID patients. But one thing that we have learned from this is we have to take care of our frontliners, because at least about 30% of them will get infected by the disease. We did complete coverage for all of their medical services just in case they get the infection. We did liberal testing. We provide complete gear protection. And we converted a part of the hospital as living quarters for those people working for or attending solely for COVID patients. And for the support facilities, we were able to get a dormitory, a walking distance from Global City, so that they can get access to the hospital as expeditiously as possible, and even provide shuttle services for those living far from the hospital. We provide hazard pays bigger than what is provided for by the Department of Labor. And for those doctors who go on duty on a regular basis, we gave a one-time lucrative incentive pay for all of them. We took care of their food, even groceries and laundry. And lately, because of the lot of depression from a lot of nurses and other co-workers, we designed a debriefing for healthcare workers. But the challenge now is how to regain patient confidence of going back to the hospital. We do not know how long this will last, but last night I was reading Moderna. Moderna is a laboratory in Massachusetts. They are now on the second phase of trying to produce a vaccine for COVID-19. And I think the projection is before the year end, they might be able to produce vaccines. The one that is being developed in Oxford had a lot of problems on their phase 1 and phase 2, and therefore they were overtaken by the Moderna. About 2 weeks ago in Israel, they were able to isolate a monoclonal antibody for COVID. This is an offshoot of convalescent plasma treatment, which is associated with a lot of problems because there's a lot of impurities. But with a purely isolated monoclonal antibody, one this is patented, there might be an available effective treatment for COVID-19. So how do we try to regain patient confidence? And I think the basic principle is to assure safety of patients when they go back to the hospital. In Global City, there seemed to be no challenge in terms of infrastructure, but in Quezon City, there's a big challenge in how to accomplish this. One is to separate COVID from non-COVID patients completely. We have instituted guidelines for the calibrated reopening of our doctors' clinics, which we started yesterday. There were about 31 patients, but this morning, as I check on the data, there were about 55 who have scheduled. And gradually, I think it's a wait-and-see situation for a lot of doctors and a lot of patients too. But as experiences and as we were able to show that there is a system being followed, many of these patients will come back to us. For non-COVID cases to be admitted, we mandated a mandatory testing for all doctors, nurses, healthcare workers, and everybody, especially going to the operating room. Because if we are sure that there is no COVID infection, then we don't have to invest on the lot of things that being utilized in terms of operating for a presumed or an established COVID patients. Of course, the new normal, mandatory mask is going to be implemented. We have designed physical distancing and provide adequate hand hygiene, and we're considering limiting or probably no visitors. If you want to have visitors, then we are going to mandate a mandatory testing for the visitors. I know there's a lot of controversy about doing testing for health workers, and for some other employees, but if you are in an environment that you get exposed to a lot of patients, especially the asymptomatic one, there is no substitute for mandatory testing, which is the PCR. But regaining patient confidence, even with availability of vaccine and effective treatment, it will take some time to be able to correct the notion on the part of the patients that it's not very safe to go back to the hospital. So those are the challenges that you will have to discuss in your hospital, how to regain confidence of patients going back to the hospital. Even if there are problems, there are opportunities. And that is why telemedicine has become an important component during this extended or enhanced community quarantine, to be able to provide consultations, information dissemination, but more importantly, as part of trying to regain the confidence, I think we should continuously focus on giving information on the preventing of lifestyle-related diseases by promoting healthy habits. Tell them about the risk of chronic conditions. They should seek consultation. Even promote sports. And I have instructed our IT to do dietary applications, focusing on healthy recipes on food, cooking demos that are healthy recipes. But the more important thing that we have considered is we will expand to new facilities because we have learned a lot of issues from all of this. Maybe we should consider purely group practice model, and I'm now preparing the hub and spoke model with a modification, because the hub and spoke model is you focus on the hub as the center and the spoke complementing the hub. But in the Philippines, probably this is not. All you have to do is identify the centers of excellence, and then we share all of the resources. The good thing with this particular model is that you can centralize a lot of support facilities like HR, supply chain, marketing, and so on and so forth. And it will create opportunities to collaborate with other facilities like smaller hospitals, because they are in dire need of support by helping them whatever way. And I think that will be the challenge that or opportunities that the COVID-19 has done to us. I think this is the last slide, and I'll be very glad to answer any questions that you might forward to the moderator of the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. De La Peña. So we will entertain questions later in the panel discussion. Our next speaker is the current Medical Center Chief 2 of Amang Rodriguez Medical Center under the Department of Health, to talk on the compliance and preparedness according to the national directives. Please welcome Dr. Imelda Mateo. Jeff? Dr. Mateo? Yes, ma'am.
I think he has to re-log in.
Okay, I think she cannot hear us. So maybe we can go first to the next speaker, Jeff.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll go back to Dr. Mateo. We'll proceed with the next speaker. So for the next speaker, we have Miss Victoria Villanueva, a consultant at Chonghua Hospital, Cebu, to talk on the guidelines for operating room infection control. Please welcome Miss Villanueva.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? May I just ask? Yes?
Yes, Ma'am Vicky, you can go
Very
ahead
good.
now.
Thank you. I would like to thank Pales and J&J for inviting me for this afternoon's webinar. Now, just an overview of my topic, which is infection control in the operating room. In the US, amidst COVID-19, they were asking how would we resume elective surgery? So they said that if there is sustained reduction in the rate of new COVID-19 cases in a geographical area for at least 14 days, elective surgery can already be done. And hopefully by this time, the facility also has appropriate number of ICU beds, PPEs, ventilators, and trained staff. Okay. This is from the American College of Surgeons, ACA, AORN, AHA. Now, in the Philippines, amidst pandemic COVID-19, when do we resume outpatient services? The surge of COVID-19 cases led to the implementation of enhanced community quarantine with the goal of flattening the curve. Healthcare facilities and the physicians concentrated on inpatient care and temporarily discontinued outpatient services. Now, with enhanced community quarantine, then going to modified ECQ and some GCQ, outpatient services have already resumed somehow in some hospitals because we have to cater to ambulatory patients who may or may not have COVID-19. This is just a newly released, not even finalized yet, stand by PCP, PSMID, and FIX. Okay. May I just show you a picture wherein there are a lot of parang kamay, no? Okay. You will see that, of course, there's a legend. These are what we call frequently touched areas in the operating room. The OR table, the lamp, the chair, other instruments, and other equipment. Okay, so in times of COVID crisis or other pandemics, it's very important to advocate cleaning of appropriate cleaning and disinfection of the operating room after each surgical procedure. Now, if I may show you the most common, the cheapest, and the most available environmental disinfectant is that of chlorine solution. On the first frame, the liquid form, if I may mention, ang brand name niya, Zonrox, Clorox, whatever, comes in 5.25% to 6.15% when you buy it in the commercial form. And for general disinfection of the ward, of the unit, OR, non-OR, intensive units, regular floors, it's 1:100. And that will give you 500 ppm parts per million of chlorine, which is the usual required concentration for regular cleaning of the hospital. Now, if you want 1,000 parts per million, which is what is being done now with COVID-19 areas, we dilute the chlorine with 1:50. 1 part of chlorine is to 50 parts of water. Now, there is also chlorine in tablet form, and this is in the form of Preop. This is sodium dichloroisocyanurate. The beauty about this product is it comes in tablet forms. Therefore, a container can already have like 40 or 50 tablets per bottle. So storage is not a problem, because the problem with liquid forms of disinfectants are, there's a constraint of space in all hospitals. So this is in a very convenient form, tablet. You dilute one every day, good for 24 hours, to be replenished the following day with another dilution or fresh concoction. If I may show you this slide, actually this is a very, very favorite slide of mine when I give lectures. On the bottom part, this is the descending order of resistance of microorganisms to disinfection and sterilization. The LLD means low-level disinfection, intermediate level disinfection for ILD, and high-level disinfection, sterilization. Okay, look at the bottom part of the slide. Lipid or medium-sized viruses. These are represented by Hep B, HIV, hepatitis C, herpes simplex, CMV, Ebola, and COVID-19 viruses fall under this category. So it just means to show that even if it's of pandemic proportion, the COVID-19 virus can be killed by low-level disinfection, meaning sodium hypochlorite and some other agents can be used for disinfecting areas contaminated with this virus. Now, when we go to pre-op considerations in the new normal, of course, screen patient for COVID-19, and it's still RT-PCR that is really recommended. Now, chest CT scan is also recommended, but the newest recommendation of Royal College of Surgeons of UK is you just do CT scan for surgeries that will involve aerosolization procedures. For example, doing general anesthesia, of course, you have to intubate the patient, suction, and it will entail generation of aerosols. But if no aerosol generating procedures are done, we can just do PCR, RT-PCR. Intra-op consideration, negative pressure room in the operating room. This is kind of hard because our ORs are built with positive pressure. Now, it's very hard that, in the Philippines, it's seldom that you see a negative pressure room in the operating room for quotation marks, dirty cases. However, a portable HEPA filter is very useful in lieu of the negative pressure. Okay, and then, of course, needed PPEs. We have to be extra careful now because of the contamination that we can get from COVID-19. Another intra-op consideration is use of single-use devices versus reuse. Okay. On the right side of the screen, you will see the international symbol for single-use devices, meaning single-use, no reuse, single-use, discard. It's number 2, the numeral 2, and there's a cross, meaning you cannot reuse. Prevention and elimination of aerosol transmission of the virus. You know, during the OR, you know this better than myself, the gas leaks and all that need to be prevented. Now, post-op, let's go to post-op. Of course, after the operation, we have to disinfect and sterilize OR instruments. Now, let's go to the bottom part of the screen. You will see that when the instruments on the last column, as per Spalding's classification, surgical instruments fall under critical classification, meaning this instrument goes through the sterile cavities of the body and the bloodstream. So for laparoscopic operations, when you go inside the sterile cavity of the body, these instruments after use need to be sterilized, meaning we have to, sterilization is a process that kills all germs, including spores. Therefore, laparoscopic instruments need to undergo steam or heat or autoclave. It can also be low temperature sterilization like sterad, formaldehyde, and ethylene oxide. So it's the same for any type of operation as long as the sterile cavities are entered. And for another consideration for post-operatively, enzymatic detergents are used. These are not disinfectants. They only remove protein substances from surfaces and from the equipment. And WHO recommends that chemical disinfection prior to cleaning is unnecessary, ineffective, and of little value in the presence of organic material. Another post-op consideration is during the cleaning or environmental disinfection of the operating room theater. On top of the manual cleaning done, which is the, that's how we clean operating rooms manually by our housekeeping staff. We can do adjunct, but it's only a help. It cannot be adjunct therapy or not doing any more manual cleaning. It's manual cleaning plus the adjunct therapy, which we can use ultraviolet radiation or vaporized hydrogen peroxide. Another post-op consideration, waste management. Waste generated by COVID-19 patients must be placed in yellow trash bin as the same as with other infectious waste or infectious cases. And for N95 masks and other PPEs, how do we dispose of them? Okay, so they are placed also in yellow infectious waste. Doffing, removing of these PPEs are done with the help of a trained observer to help and also to see if there are breaches in terms of contamination and all that. Let me say something about N95 masks because there's a shortage now worldwide because this is a pandemic experienced by the whole world. So in IPC, Infection Prevention and Control, our dictum states that if the N95 mask does not fit, therefore it does not work. And extended use of the N95 mask is better than reuse. When using N95 mask, there should be fit and leak test. It's the kind of mask used in aerosol generating procedures. It's supposed to be approved and certified by NIOSH or the Occupational Safety and Health, and ideally must be single use. However, as I mentioned, due to shortage worldwide, it can be reprocessed through the virtue of FDA emergency use authorization for sterilization system. And when you when you reprocess N95 masks, there are some considerations. Number one, only non-cellulose type can be re-sterilized or reprocessed, and using only the 8822 type of N95 mask or similar. Masks should be packed individually in Tyvek pouches. Not all types of sterile machines can do the re-sterilization of N95 masks. The ones that can do the re-sterilization are the 100NX, NX, and 100S. And just like any sterilization process, we should run a biological indicator or BI in every cycle. And when you reprocess an N95 mask, the maximum is 2 times only. And also, if the mask is visibly soiled, defective, wet, it must be discarded. Now, in conclusion, amidst healthcare pandemics such as COVID-19, infection prevention control guidelines must be enhanced and strictly followed by everyone. So thank you all very much for listening.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Villanueva. Now we go back to the topic of compliance and preparedness according to the national directives. Again, please welcome Dr. Imelda Mateo.
Everyone, thank you for the invite. Okay, so these are the slides I would like to share with you.
Doctora, excuse me.
Yes.
Can you mute your mic in your laptop, please? Okay. Doctora, I think your phone. Jeff, can you unmute her? Jeff, can you unmute her, please?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
All
Okay.
right, sorry about that. Okay, and we can start with the presentation. Dr.
Jeff, please. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so good afternoon. I'm tasked to discuss about compliance for a training hospital in a government institution. So next slide, please. All right. So Amang Rodriguez Memorial Medical Center, being a national retained hospital, is governed by a lot of agencies. And these are just 5 of the agencies that have direct jurisdictions, or we follow the policies from in order for our operations to proceed. No? And we're always guided by department memorandum from these agencies. These are the 5. Of course, we're directly under the Department of Health. Since we're a government entity, we're governed too by the Civil Service Commission, our financing coming from PhilHealth, and the Department of Budget Management. And our procurement process is based on the guidelines given by the GPPB, or the Government Procurement Policy Board. Okay, to date, that's until May 11, the Department of Health had issued 71 department memorandum. It started in January 21. All these are the ones relevant to the COVID pandemic. So the more relevant department memo issued by DOH is that one issued last April 16, which specifically says that there should be suspension of elective admissions, surgeries, and outpatient services. the latest directive from Department of Health is on the interim guidelines on the return to work. Okay, assessing the compliance of our agency against the different department orders and memo issued by DOH. So this is just 56 of the 71, which is relevant to hospital operations. They classified it into 7 general headings: the testing capacity, case management, health facilities, our health facility network components, our partnerships with the community and local government units, our participation in the repatriation project, and of course, PhilHealth packages. So you'd see our percent compliance, and so far, we're doing good except the testing capacity because we don't have yet our molecular laboratory. So we do our swab in our centers, but still send them out to the accredited molecular laboratory for COVID testing. And the PhilHealth packages, of course, we always follow the case rates, and we benefit from that because the hospital gets most of our finances from our PhilHealth income, and even the professional fee sharing for oral medical specialists and non-medical personnel. So we're working on our health facility network component. So this is partnership with the local government units. I'm sure you've heard of Marikina local government letting us use a temporary treatment facility, which is where we can accommodate an overload of patients seen in our hospital. So next slide, please. The Civil Service Commission came out with 4 relevant to COVID pandemic. And the latest one is on revised interim guidelines for alternative work arrangement and support mechanism. Why is this relevant to the departments of surgery training? Because our residents are, of course, compensated by the government. So, and we're a government entity. So they are public servants as well. Next slide. And of course, our resources for plantilla and budget for contractuals or job orders are issued with the DOH and Department of Budget Management circular. So we get our salaries, we get our hazard pays, and our compensation from this collaboration of these 2 departments. Next slide, please. So this is the Department of Surgery of Amang Rodriguez Memorial Medical Center. You'd see familiar faces, I'm sure. The next slide, please. So this is the composition of the Department of Surgery. They have been accredited for the past 16 years, supposed to be for revisit, for reaccreditation last April 21. We have 18 residents distributed as such per year level, and we have 19 medical specialists. To date, surgery ward has a total bed capacity of 70 beds, including 4 ICU and 2 burn unit beds, but this has been converted to COVID ward. So currently they share the ward with the OB department at the 4th floor, and they just have a total bed capacity of 25. So before the pandemic, a daily census of the cases seen by the Department of Surgery is from 60 to 80 patients. And this includes general surgery and subspecialty cases. However, with the onset of the pandemic, these declined to 25% of the previous census. So we only see 15 to 20 patients, including already GS, which is most specifically due to trauma and appendicitis. You'd see here the statistics or the census comparing last year, that's 2019, with this year. You'd see that we have increased our census in 2020 by 40%. Compare January to 2019 to 2020, you'd see a 40% increase until February. But with the onset of the pandemic and the suspension of elective surgery, you'd see the dwindling cases already. So although the May 22 cases is only like the first 10 days of May, but still, if you multiply that by 3, that's still 66, which is still less than half of what we had in May of 2019. Next slide. So since March 16 to May 15, We had a total of 109 emergency surgeries, no electives, of course. And the OPD consult from the usual 60 to 70 patients seen per day has gone down to 10 to 15 consults. And this is through our e-consult, which we have shifted to for the past 2 months already. So what are the challenges to cope with the new normal perspective of our government entity? I group them into two: human resource and then infrastructure and equipment. For human resource, what are those that we need to cope with? First is the issue on compensations and salary in case senior residents who haven't met the required number of surgical cases are extended in training. I recently had a dialogue with Assistant Secretary Ronquillo of the Department of Health Human Resource Development Bureau, and he said that we may be allowed to continue or renew their appointment of the residents who need to still meet the required cases. So that means for all training hospitals in the government that are participating today, you can be relieved because you can give a sigh of relief because you will be allowed because of a good justification, because they suspended the conduct of elective surgical procedures. But what about the total items given for the whole department for surgical residents? It might be limited such that those senior residents hanging on still to the item will not be vacated for incoming first year. However, I think we can still address that by hiring on a contractual basis these first year residents that will come in. And I'm sure in 2021, there will already be an increase in total plantilla because of the revised staffing pattern done by a team of the Department of Health. So rest assured, I don't think we will not have a problem as far as government agencies are concerned or the government training institutions. Okay, what about the infrastructure? The present condition or present situation of our operating room settings are as follows. We have a total of 4 operating rooms, but only 2 are operational since March 15. And 1 operating room is being shared with the OB department. We have no negative pressure in the operating room as what is usually seen in most of the operating theaters or rooms of the different hospitals. We only have 1 HEPA filter available today. But how are we going to address this? Next slide, please. Okay, so the Department of Surgery came out with the operating room preparedness and response to public health emergencies. It consists of 13 items, no? But I just chose the 6 which I feel will be relevant to the function of the Department of Surgery. So they came out with the operating room traffic scheme, the designated very specific dressing room for male and female, the donning and doffing area. There should be a separate entry and exit for personnel coming in and out. And there should be an in-place air conditioning units or a proper air conditioning system in the operating theater or operating room, and the presence of heat and moisture exchanger with viral filters. Next slide. Okay, this is what the layout of their proposed new operations or directions in the operating room. You'd see here we have 4 dedicated ORs, but with a new normal, we will only be utilizing 2. One would be OR4, which is for non-COVID, and OR2, which is for the COVID or suspects or COVID patients. So they proposed the flow of personnel that would come in and out with the different legends inside. So the 2 operating rooms will serve as a passageway from the doffing area to where the personnel, nurses, doctors, or physicians will do their exit. Okay, next slide, please. What about the equipment? Okay, will this be a big challenge? I don't think, not much though, because to date, under the Bayanihan to Heal as one act, and I'm sure Dr. Ragasa is one of the audience here, is very instrumental in facilitating the availability of this instrument. We are recipient already and just waiting for the delivery of the following instrument. And I think the more relevant ones here are the video laryngoscope, cardiac monitors, HEPA filters, and the high-flow oxygen nasal cannula for non-intubated patient. Okay, next slide. And there's also the resources or financing or budget coming from directly the Department of Health under the Health Facility Enhancement Program. And we have requested this. In fact, I think this has been allocated to us already. They're just finishing with the procurement process. This will be downloaded to us, hopefully before June starts, or maybe before the end of June. So we have anesthesia machines, additional video endoscope, a portable brain injury diagnostic set, a suction machine, lap tower with hysteroscope instrument, and portable ventilators. I think we will be recipient of 5 negative pressure systems. So one of those can be installed in the operating room. Next slide, please. But using aside from the 2 sources of fund, we have our hospital income, and we're allowed by the Department of Budget Management to procure still the additional equipment we need. So the color Doppler ultrasound machine, pulse oximeter, which are heavy duty, and the power air purifying respirators. These will be charged against the hospital income with, of course, with permission from the Department of Budget Management. Next slide, please. So what are the plans then of the Department of Surgery? They plan to start this June to have target 1 to 2 elective procedures per day. They would continue with their Tuesday conferences, but this time using webinar as their portal or as their baseline machinery. Now they will also have additional lectures, which they will do every Saturday. And the residents will be encouraged or will be attending all the available webinar conferences pertinent to the training of surgery. And they would plan to use the hospital laparoscopic tower for simulation purposes. And of course, number 2, that has already been addressed and ensured. Because to date, the hospital has a complete PPE supplies good enough for the next month. And we've been receiving continuous downloaded supplies from the Department of Health, I think every 2 or 3 weeks, aside from the different donations we get from our private partners. And we'll install the negative pressure system in the operating room. I don't think this is the responsibility of the department, but responsibility of management, specifically the engineering. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, so are we really ready to start elective procedures? So this as what surgery is planning to start in June. So let's see, how are we going to address this? I think I have a next slide. Of course, this will be yes if the department memo and the suspension will be rescinded. And I think it will be because there is already a directive to return to new normal. That means to slowly applying or shifting to the usual activities of the department with some limitations, of course, on social distancing and, of course, practicing the strict infection prevention and control measures. And once this equipment needed for the new normal are available, so maybe we'd wait for another 2 to 3 weeks, and they can start with their elective procedures. What about the infrastructure concerns? I think this will all be addressed and will take around 3 to 4 weeks. So thank you. That's how we are here in the Amang Rodriguez Memorial Medical Center.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mateo. Now we proceed to our panel discussion. So joining our panel is the current chair of the Philippine Board of Surgery and the head of the COVID Task Force of PGH, Dr. Orlando Ocampo. And may I ask Dr. Miguel Mendoza to help us moderate on this open forum. Mic is yours.
Yes, thank you, Mon, and thank you to our speakers for your excellent presentations, as well as for sharing your knowledge and experience as we transition to the new normal in the preparation phase. There are several questions that I would like to read from the chat box, no, the Q&A. One question is probably addressed to Dr. De La Peña. Sir, you mentioned about mandatory testing for all your staff and consultants, and also the question is how would maybe you could enlighten us on this, as well as how often should healthcare workers be tested? That's for Dr. De La Peña. Thank you, sir. Nakamute, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
We made a decision to do mandatory testing for everybody because we really want to separate COVID from non-COVID. The operating room really is away from, it is not within the same complex. Although in Quezon City, it's a little bit of a challenge, but there is an engineering solution that had been instituted already.
Mm-hmm.
So we answer for the cost of the mandatory testing for everybody. Doctors, nurses, hospital care workers, and other support system who will be going into the operating room. Now, ideally, it should be good for 3 weeks, but it's going to be a very costly undertaking. And therefore, I think we have made the decision. We have not yet made the decision whether we're going to require it every 3 weeks. It is going to be as indicated by trying to do screening for all of them.
Yes, sir.
If they're asymptomatic and they do not have any exposure, the main problem really is that about 40% of our doctors are working in other hospitals. That's the main problem. And the policies in the hospitals that they are working seem to be not very as stringent as we have in here. So that will be taken into consideration after 3 weeks.
All right, sir. Thank you for that. There's a related question. And yes, Ray, I could see you raising your hand. Any thoughts about this? Your microphone, please.
Yes. Good
Yes.
afternoon. Can I ask a question or pass a question to Dr.
Yes, please.
This is with regards to the group practice, the hub and spoke model, sir. Good afternoon. We're going into the new normal. Definitely, as you mentioned, there are many doctors transferring from one hospital to the next. And I think one solution would be group practice and entailing one physician to stay in one center. Sir, can you elaborate more on this hub and spoke group practice? Will it entail limiting physician from moving from one center to the next, or is it a salaried or a merit type of compensation? And also, probably, sir, can we go into the medical legal issues of group practice?
Okay. Well, we are now labeling it as not new normal, but a better normal, because we wanted to be positive in our terminologies. The hub and spoke model is ideally, this has been started in the US. And the hub is where all of the resources are being poured, all of the complex cases are being handled there, so that all of those people belonging to the complicated cases are being funneled towards that particular hospital. And the spoke are supposed to be complementary. Now, in the Philippines, I've been looking into the different models. Maybe it may not be applicable here because the areas or the distances between the hospitals of our expansion may not be ideal for that. It might also be very difficult to unravel the centers of excellence in each and every hospital. So we'll have to sit down with all of the practitioners and decide which hospital will be labeled a center of excellence. For example, maybe medical tourism could be transferred towards Asiana, which we're going to build probably next year. We're going to put up there a cancer center specifically for children, specifically hematologic, and some other malignancies also. But robotics might be might remain here in global city. This is part and parcel of our scenario testing. What will be the final outcome? But basically, the guiding principle in doing so is that in our feasibility study, we were able to find out that these are now the demands of the consumers. Number one is the care should be close to their home. Number two, it should be less costly, and there must be a more efficient system. We have also found out that there's a lack of specialists, especially the super specialists. And therefore, in those particular situations, that will be the priority for the mandatory group practice. We are now embarking into digitalization, and we just got derailed for about 6 months because of the COVID pandemic. We might be able to have a fully operational electronic medical records by middle of next year. And certainly in the hub and spoke mechanism, telemedicines will be very important in terms of sharing group practices and even sharing on consultation between the hub. In here, maybe there will not be a pure hub, but a hub or centers of excellence for each and every hospital. And probably we are going to expand a spoke laboratories as well as other essential services like dialysis, outpatient, what do you call this, outpatient cardiac conditions, and some others. It's still thinking about it, which are the ones. And for all you know, we might be buying some of the smaller hospitals. If you are willing to sell your hospitals, maybe we'll buy it to serve as a spoke. But basically, that's the a pure hub and spoke probably will not be applicable, but it is a modified hub and spoke. The hubs are centers of excellence for some conditions, and we just share the services for those depending on the organ or the disease that we're trying to hold.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, medical legal, whether it is going to be salaried, whether it's going to be, I'm still working on that. And it will have to depend upon the market that we're trying to look into and the people whom we are going to recruit. But basically, what is in my mind is it will be 60 to 70% young people. Yeah, that's the key.
Young people, sir.
Young people. Hindi young ones. Dr.
Young
Tan probably will not be qualified.
Okay, sir. Thank you for your answer. At meron din question dito po for siguro probably for Dr. Aimee Mateo as well as Dr. Art. Maybe you can share with this. Are all your from an anonymous attendee, are all your operating rooms with negative pressure, or should all the operating rooms be negative pressure? Ano bang design sa
that's
amang, ano
expensive.
bang design sa stock sa
Expensive.
tank tools? Maybe Dr. Mateo, you can start with that answer first.
So
give it to
right
Dr.
now with our present setup, we have 4 operating rooms. So we have decided to have at least 2 of these rooms have the negative pressure. No? But Dr. Peña is really correct. It's quite expensive. In fact, the one we are procuring for our laboratory, which we plan to apply for a higher level molecular lab, we got a quote of 3 million. So considering it's quite costly, we're planning to just install 2 out of the 4 negative pressures in the operating room. So that will cost us sounding 6 million for the 2 negative pressure systems.
At present po, Doktora, wala pong negative
pressure. But we are looking, the engineering department is trying to look into the setup, because when it was repaired last 2012, I wasn't here yet as the medical center chief. They said there's a provision for ventilation for a negative pressure. So we'll look into that. I don't know. But of course, immediately, kahit isa man lang sana, no, would be able to install.
Yes. Dr. De La Peña, your thoughts about the negative pressure ORs? And maybe we can ask also Dr. Ocampo sa PGH. Anong setup?
That's the main reason why we would want to separate COVID from non-COVID. It's very dangerous to combine operating rooms within one complex, one specifically from COVID cases only, and the others for non-COVID cases. Very, very difficult to accomplish. There will always be chances or opportunities for cross-contamination in that particular situation. You really have to make a decision because it's very difficult. Now, producing a negative pressure for operating rooms is too expensive. So what we're going to do is our outpatient department, which we converted, outpatient operating rooms, which we converted for the non-COVID cases. That is the reason why we're converting it into not really a negative pressure, but with big exhaust to be able to throw off the air contamination within that particular system. That's the reason why we have the COVID operations are only on the third floor, non-COVID operations. Para at least, of course, you can argue then probably in about 5% may makakalusot yan, ano? Even if you do testing, if you do that. But, you know, a meticulous physical examination and review of systems and good history, baka naman mabawasan yung 5% to 1 to 2%. There's a question to me that was texted to me. Will we request CT scan as a mandatory test for? It's not cost effective, probably as indicated based on your assessment.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. And Dr. Bok Ocampo, your thoughts as far as PGH is concerned?
Good afternoon.
Good.
Dali, nag-e-echo.
Good afternoon, Dr. Bok.
Yes. Kasama ko kasi dito lahat ng mga PALES eh. I'm with Dr. Tony Perez, Dr. Noning Monroy, and Dr. Dennis Serrano. And we're proud to say yung COVID operation kasi ng PGH are run by surgeons. Yes. So, by the way, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. De La Peña as well. Kasi hindi namin napasalamatan si Sir. Alam mo, nung nag-i-start ang COVID, iisa pa lang ang pasyente ng PGH, 100 na ang pasyente ng St. Luke's. So actually, lahat ng mga best practices ng St. Luke's, inopia lang namin. Kaya tumakbo ng maganda ito. And I think Dr. De La Peña is one of the few who's giving us advice early on. Sir, thank you very much for all the advice and the best practices. Regarding the question on negative pressure, siguro pareho lang naman tayo na nasa government hospital na medyo ang setup natin ay exhaust system. Siguro laminar flow ang pinakamaganda. But ang OR kasi laging positive pressure eh. So para malamig. But if you want to convert sa negative, pinatingnan na namin yung mga OR namin, it would be costly. So what we're doing right now is ayusin yung exhaust system and put HEPA filters in our COVID OR. As well as siguro UV light and physical disinfection after each operation. So parang ang nangyayari dito sa PGH ngayon, pag nag-opera kami ng COVID or suspect, let's say the operation will last for 3 hours, yun na ring operating room na yun ng recovery room, which will last for another maybe 4 hours. And then lilinisin siya for another 3 hours or so. So parang 2 operasyon lang ang nagagawa sa isang operating room. Regarding yung separate operating room, narinig ko na yan kay Dr. De La Peña early on, na dapat talaga yung operating room ng COVID completely separate to sa non-COVID. And we're following that principle as well. We're looking at our OPD OR, which we have 4 rooms, as the COVID OR. And we're designing it now, siguro in a month's time, we will transfer all COVID operations there para malinis na yung I think we have 30 operating rooms sa third floor para we will designate it as non-COVID altogether.
Yes, thank you. So those are very important information that was shared by our three panelists as far as the operating room is concerned and negative pressure. And I hope everybody could pick up from that. And we have already 343 participants now listening to us. And probably just ask one more question, another question kay Ma'am Vicky Villanueva. This has something to do with the, is it acceptable practice to bring home your own N95 and just reuse it every 5 to 7 days? And what would be the appropriate N95s to use, no? N95s to use for our healthcare workers?
Okay.
Ma'am Vicky?
Yes, Doctor, I heard the question. Yan ang palaging itinatanong.
Okay.
Ang N95 mask, as much as possible, kasi ginagamit siya sa, hindi lang COVID-19, sa airborne diseases. Varicella, chickenpox, measles, TB, yan ang pinaka-common. Now, hindi siya dapat iuwi. Kasi, syempre, pag ginamit mo siya sa ospital, ano na siya? Parang pwedeng na-contaminate, pwedeng may maiuwi ka pa na dumi. Ang pinakamaganda nating gawin is, ang ginagawa ng iba, for example, RITM, kasi meron tayong mga kaibigan dyan. At saka ito common practice. What you do, pag ginamit mo ang N95, ilagay mo siya sa breathable brown bag. So yung brown bag na parang pang-grocery, hindi yung plastic na sando bag. Kasi yun, magkikreate yun ng perspiration. Magkakaroon ng tubig. Pero yung breathable brown bag, dun mo siya ilalagay. Now, yan din ang mga suggestion na ilagay din yan sa WHO and in other APSIC. Yan ang mga parang approved way of storing N95 masks. Now, you put your name on it and talagang wala namang ibang gagamit nun kasi matatakot. Now, ang ginagawa nila sa nagre-reuse, kasi you can't help but reuse them, especially nowadays that there is shortage of it. So ang ginagawa nila, bibigyan ka ng 5, for example, na N95 mask for your own use. So lalagyan mo yon, for example, sa akin, Victoria Villanueva, number 1. Isusuot ko yun ng Monday. For example, duty ako ng 5 days. So ilalagay ko siya sa brown bag, tapos naka-store siya in a safe place in the unit in the hospital. Now, N95 mask number 2 for myself also, yun ang susuotin ko bukas. Number 3, 4, and 5. So makaka-repeat ako ng after the 5th, parang na hindi mo kasi siya pwede ma-reprocess kung hindi ka gagamit nung sinabi nga yung specific na sa sterilizing machine. Sino naman ang maraming ospital na mayroon nun? Hindi naman lahat mayroon. So you will go again for number 1 on, after 1 week, number 2 and all. So parang magagamit mo siya ng 3 beses. Kasi yung una brand new. Okay. Yung susunod na gamit mo, pwedeng hanggang 5 and then pwede pang isa ulit. In fact, those without recommendations, kasi nga nagkakaroon ng tawag dito, nagkukulang, may nakalagay pa nga na pwede without recommendation hanggang maximum of 5. Pero pilitin lang natin gawin na 3 beses. Yung iba nga 2 lang, pero at least you can reuse it. But once wet, once visibly soiled, and once the integrity is no longer maganda, it has to be thrown away. Bringing home, no. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
And
Sige
as
po.
regards, yung may isa pang question, di ba, Doktor, yung ano namang klaseng mga N95 masks ang ginagamit? Naku, ito na. Ngayon nga po, parang na-label lang na kung ano N95 mask na. ito, I'm not endorsing any product, pero talagang ang nakita, kaya ang parang may nakita ko dito sa question and answer or chat box na nagsasabi na yung 3M daw ba, yan. Yung po talaga, yung parang more on the ideal side. So ang number, actually, ano siya, talo pa ang kotse, brand or ganyan. Yung numbers, hindi ako masyadong mahusay, pero ang palagi nating ginagamit is the 82, sorry, ito baka mamali ako, 8210 ng 3M at saka yung 1860. Ito naman, sabi ko nga, wala tayong magagawa kung proven effective sa maraming institutions. I don't mind saying the brand. Kasi ang nangyayari po sa kanya, siya yung talagang parang matibay. May iba kasi ngayon na talagang, grabe, isang gamit mo pa lang, hindi mo na parang sira na and all. Oo. Ayaw kong magsalita kung saan galing, pero parang ang contest ngayon between US, yun yung, pwede na rin siguro sabihin, doktor, alam naman na lahat, yun yung N95, parang American standard, yung made in China, KN95.
Aba. Okay. Salamat po. Salamat po. At sige, huwag niyo iuwi yung mga N95 niyo na ginamit niyo sa ospital, no? Yun ang advice ni Ma'am Victoria Villanueva, ating infectious nurse.
Doctor, may I just ask, may isa pang number, kasi parang concerned sila dun sa number. Isa pang number nung sa 3M is 1860. Sila yung parang common na ginagamit.
Sige po. Noted po. Thank you po. Thank you po. Mon, Jeff, any other questions from you or?
Question?
Yeah.
Question?
Dr. Palines? Yes, Dr. Palines, go.
Dr. Alex Palines, yes.
I have two questions for Dr. De La Peña and Dr. Mateo. The first question is, how are you able to cope up with the COVID-related anxiety and burnout on your doctors, nurses, etc.? Kasi in our side, especially the private hospitals, they are saddled with the resignation of the nurses. Pagka nalaman nilang sila i-assign doon sa COVID tent or doon sa COVID ward. And the second question is, I'm sure the cost of hospitalization will increase. So how much do you predict will be the increase in the hospitalization which will burden the patients? Kasi I'm sure when you resume your regular elective cases, ang unang tatanungin ng pasyente magkano ho ba ang magiging gastos pagka ako'y nagpa-opera. I'm sure it will not be the same as before the COVID crisis.
All right. So, salamat Alex sa tanong mo. That those are very relevant, important questions, no? Siguro tanong muna natin si Dr. De La Peña from the perspective of the private hospital. Yeah.
We have experienced resignation also. We have experienced nurses from the at the very beginning of the COVID problem. We have experienced nurses at the emergency room being fetched by their parents and submitting resignation at once. But this is part and parcel of some of the problems that a lot of anxieties because we do not know a lot of things about coronavirus, SARS type 2. But the question there is, take care of your health workers. What we did, we give them everything. We cover for all of their medical expenses when they get sick. We give them a very high hazard pay. They do not have to go home because people who are handling COVID-proven cases, they work several days and then they have several days off. And they live in the hospital. Together, they are being fed. We even gave groceries. We even gave shoes. And we even take care of their laundry. Because when you try to make them feel that they're being taken care of, okay yon.
Yes.
But there's a lot of also of psychological problems that we have encountered, and therefore we ask psychiatry and psychology department to, as well as our HR, to develop a debriefing process. And certainly the debriefing process was able to help a lot of people, a lot of nurses to be able to come back. Second is a part of trying to increase taking care of your nurses is managers should always talk to them. Managers should always join them. Managers should always talk to them and ask what they need, because in doing so, I must admit to everybody that I was a COVID survivor. I stayed in the hospital 34 days alone, solitary quarantine in a negative pressure room. And certainly you really have to appreciate what they are doing. And not unless you appreciate what they are doing, you will not be able to compensate or commensurate what they are sacrificing to help you. So those are the things that we are doing. Now, in terms of cost, certainly there will be an additional cost. PPE costs a lot. And I think there will be an increase of about between 30 to 35% additional cost. But of course, it all depends upon the volume also. As of now, we can haggle, depend from the suppliers, because this is now a supplier's market. Because of the very high demand, they dictate a lot of prices. But if your volume is high, you're also able to haggle, and that's the reason why we're able to lower down the cost. But certainly there will be an additional cost. I think my estimate is between 20 to 30% as compared to the pre-COVID pandemic.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Just one thing, I like yung balbas mo ngayon, Alex.
Nainggit nga ako.
Okay, salamat sir. Kulong bahay.
Oo nga. So, napaka-importante yung sinabi.
Mon, I think
Okay, yes. Yeah, I think naghang si Ike.
Yep.
So, I think we give now the mic to Dr. Mateo. Ma'am.
Yes, so there are two questions raised. One is, do we encounter resignations? But so far, we're blessed that of the nurses that we have, especially those already with us, there are no resignations. They would go on leave, yes, but not really to resign. And the only 3 resignations I got from nurses are the newly appointed ones. So we added contractual nurses to augment the human resource or the manpower for nursing. So they haven't started yet, and they resigned already upon prodding of their family and the community. So just the thought of them going to work and just the knowledge that they will be working with us becomes a deterrent to them already. So I got 3 resignation from nurses. So what about doctors? No resignations. But how do we cope? How do we assist them in coping with depression? The timing or the scheduling of duties of the residents is like they go on, either they have an option, straight 1 week or straight 2 weeks, and then they go off or on their leave or off period for the same period. So 1 week off, 1 week on duty, 2 weeks off or 2 weeks on duty. And before they are discharged from their duty, they are stratified or screened by the family and community medicine physicians to see if they have symptoms or no symptoms. But they are always advised to go on quarantine regardless of whether they are asymptomatic or not. So Dr. Peña is correct. You really have to take care of them. And in fact, it's quite not difficult for government entities because we have sub-allotments for covering for their transportation. Their meals is free, and we provide provisions for their accommodations. Our auditorium and executive lounge have been converted to temporary boarding house or dormitories by providing them separate tents, just what you see in evacuation center. So it's 24/7 air conditioned. They get access to the bathrooms, and of course the hazard pay, while it's not coming from our own income, it's downloaded also by the Department of Health. So they get additional hazard pay for every day of duty or every day that they are present in the hospital. We have well in place or much in place psychiatry department who attends to the briefing or any consults, but most of the time this is on e-consultation already. So we just had we encountered one medical I think OB resident who had really depression, had to take a leave because of the death of the husband who has been diagnosed to be COVID positive. So otherwise, and what else? Okay, I did an AVP. I contracted one medical officer to do an audiovisual presentation as a tribute to all our frontliners. So it's being played on air, all our monitors in the hospital. And in fact, it has been posted in Facebook and YouTube. And that is our way of thanking them and giving them recognition for the sacrifices that I have been doing for the hospital and for our country. So that's how we manage it here in Amman.
Okay.
What about the cost? Now, the second question, the cost, that's not much of a burden from us because ever since we've been a no balance billing hospital, that means we have really discouraged patients, and that's a directive from the Department of Health. And we have sub-allotments to take care of this costing from PhilHealth, from the medical assistance for indigent program. So, and we are encouraged to spend our income, part of our MOE, for supplies for these patients.
Thank you.
Okay.
Salamat, Dr. Mateo. And,
you're welcome.
Thank you to those valuable insights from Dr. De La Peña, Dr. Mateo, and also to Ma'am Villanueva. Thank you very much for that. Mon, I turn the floor to you.
Yes. I think Dr. Boco Campo, you want to say something?
Regarding the two questions. Okay, so again, tama naman yung sentiment, and I think talagang malaki ang takot, hindi lang ng nurse, pati ng mga doktor when we start the COVID operation. So again, we copy what St. Luke's did. Sila kasi may libreng accommodation, may libreng transpo, may libreng food. So we just adapted what they're doing, and it's working well. I remember the first day, may mga nurse na umiiyak habang nagdodon. So I think at one point in time, I think ako, si Noneng, and even our director, Don, and went inside the ward just to assure everybody that it's safe and it's okay to be there.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Ocampo. So I think we have discussed a lot. Dr. Sarmiento, you're raising your hand.
Yes, Ray.
Yes, just a question to Dr. Boc and Dr. Mateo. In terms of, as you mentioned earlier, we all work in some form, or we get in contact with government hospitals. Do you think, since we are dependent on budget from DOH or from the Office of the President, do you think a portion of the hospital, if we convert them to testing, do you think the hospital will be able to earn money from being a COVID testing center?
Can I start with that?
Meaning,
yes,
this will augment the income of the hospital in terms of becoming a accredited COVID testing center.
No, we can if there are walk-in patients, outpatients. But for our own patients, it won't be a source of revenue because we are obliged to do the no balance billing. So we don't charge. So we're really dependent on the downloaded fund and part of our quantified free services. Now, we will stratify the patients that would come in if they are really not would not fall under the social service criteria for indigents. Yes, we can earn a little, but I don't think it's enough for us to be a revenue center if we cater to diagnostics. Yes.
How about Dr. De La Peña? What are your thoughts regarding the questions of Dr. Sarmiento?
Testing would be volume dependent, but you have to establish also, after you have been approved, you will have to establish a good track record. You see, as of now, a lot of people are saying that these are the testing centers, but look at the backlog of the results. Our PCR, you can turn around within 48 hours. As early as 24 hours, you can do it. But what is happening now, look at a lot of people who had been quarantined, the OFWs, they have been there for 30 days, sometimes even up to 60 days. You have to remember also that you're looking into proteins, and not processing the specimen immediately can lead into false negative because they become denatured, or especially they're not well immersed into that preservative that's being utilized. So it's not unless you are able to drive a critical volume, it is not going to be a revenue earning center. It has to have, you must be able to maintain a certain volume. But to be able to do so, you must establish a track record that you're doing it well and you are able to get the results as soon as you have promised it's going to be released. Other than that, wala yan. Ako, sabihin ko sa'yo, off the record na lang, ano? They're saying that, you know, a lot of government and other private institutions they are being farmed out to us also. Because they don't have any safety cabinets. It's not as simple as that. No? Initially, when we were consulted by one big organization who is now claiming that they are doing the most number of tests, they say that they can do 3,000 to 4,000. Our technical people were consulted when they asked them, how many safety cabinets do you have? Only one. You can only process 240. So, you see, that's why I do not rely on the data being given by here. Because, you see, I became a COVID patient. You know, the contact tracing that went to my house, 3 weeks. With all the sirens blazing and all of the people in hazmat. Nagulat lahat yung subdivision namin. Pero 3 weeks na. How can you do contact tracing in 3 weeks? In fact, lahat yan. Sinabi ng asawa ko, my husband is still confined. Tinatanong, how many are you in the family? Sabi niya, no, we have been tested already and all of them were negative. So really, there's a big problem with testing. And I know for a fact that there should be a critical volume that should be done. Not all. It should be a proper sampling that should be done. And only after that critical number has been achieved, then we will know the truth. The significant problem of COVID infection in the Philippines. The epicenter is National Capital Region. And I think they should be aiming between 1 to 2% of the entire population. It's about 20 million. So you can just imagine their capacity now is about 20,000. Counting even the possibility that could be done by the PCR machine that they still ordered or have not yet been activated. Yun ang malaking problema rito talaga. And yet, after this, saying, we have now the second surge, no? Wala pang ang community contamination nung una, sasabihin yung first surge. Ngayon, may second surge. Kabubukas-bukas lang nung ECQ to EQ. Wala pang 2 weeks, may second surge na agad. Nak ng weteng talaga. Medyo malaking problema natin dito talaga.
Okay, sir. Salamat, sir. Salamat. Maraming salamat. At
Okay.
I think we have to cut this session already. It was a very interesting discussion with all the insights coming from our speakers. Maraming salamat sa inyo,
Thank you
Dr.
too.
De La Peña.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Mateo, maraming
Thank you
salamat.
very much for the
Dr.
invite.
Pok,
Thank you.
Ocampo, of course, sa iyo.
Thank you.
Maraming salamat kay Madam Vicky. Thank you. We're now going to our second, Mon. Could you
Yes.
give the floor to
Yeah.
you? Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ike. Thank
Good
you,
to see you,
everyone,
Art.
for that
I
session.
like that, Art. Hefe, I like that. Amy, how are you?
Sir, miss you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Looking
Thank you.
good. Bye-bye.
Magtatrabaho
Everyone.
muna ako ha. Salamat
Thank you
sa
po.
inyo.
May meeting pa po. I'll run
Thank you
to
very
another
much.
meeting. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much,
Okay.
sir. Bye-bye po.
Thank
Bye.
you. We'll now proceed to the second session. So the second session will be the PALAS guidelines to the new normal. So the speaker is a board of director of PALAS from Cebu. Please welcome Dr. Don Rosello. Don?
Hi, good afternoon. How can I share the screen? Hello, good afternoon.
Yes.
Yeah, Don,
below.
go ahead.
Yeah.
Just
Okay.
press share screen, Don.
So, share lang.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then, yeah, that's it. Then just play lang.
Okay.
All
So,
right.
good afternoon to everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the PALAS board for giving me this opportunity to speak in front of everyone and assigning me to present what we've collectively worked on with regards to our updated algorithms. So I will be presenting to you a couple of algorithms, one for laparoscopy and a little bit more on, or a little bit about our algorithm for endoscopy. So first, our primary considerations, we have to understand that both minimally invasive surgery and open surgery are associated with aerosolization of blood-borne viruses. That's something that we already know. Okay, so there is little evidence regarding the relative risk of MIS versus open surgery with regards to COVID-19. Okay, so the main problem that we have with the MIS is the pneumoperitoneum that we are creating, and when we release it, it can aerosolize blood-borne viruses. MIS has several proven benefits over open surgery, including reduced length of stay, less pain, and less wound-related complications. Okay, so it is something that we have to understand that we as PALAS fellows and PCS fellows are fully aware of the current conditions of our locality and willing and able to provide high quality care for our patients and able to make sound clinical judgment with regards to critical issues. So initially, PALAS came out with a position statement regarding laparoscopy during the start of this COVID-19 pandemic, when the country had to be shut down with the aim of flattening the curve. So hospital resources, hospital beds, so hospital supplies, PPEs, manpower had to be diverted to controlling the disease. All of the elective procedures, as you could see here, all of the elective procedures were canceled. Non-emergent procedures were delayed. Okay, so there were several recommendations, all of which are to keep the patients and the healthcare workers safe. So the main idea for this one is actually safety. Okay, but we could not stick to this forever. And in reality, several of these statements for this slide, several of these statements remain relevant. Okay, and for example, like when in doubt, treat patients as COVID. That is still relevant even until now. Create a COVID-19 OR, and it was mentioned in the earlier that ideally a dedicated OR for COVID-19 patients should be present, and to organize the workflow. So it's very important to organize the workflow, the OR flow, where the patients are headed, identify what is contaminated, identify proper donning and doffing rooms, create and follow a strict protocol with regards to disinfection of instruments. Here, you can see it here, and disposal of wastes and disposal of garbage. So these are all very important. And ideally, for example, like COVID positive patients should ideally have a different passage. For example, if they're sharing ORs, there's no choice in your institution and you have to share ORs, COVID and non-COVID, they should have a separate passageway. Or if it's not possible, then all of the COVID surgery should be done when there is no other surgery that is being performed. And these patients should go directly to the OR and not linger in some waiting area while waiting for the nurses to finish endorsements or something like that. One more item I would like to point out with regards to our previous position statement, or it is still a current position statement, is I would like to reiterate this one, which is actually prevention and elimination of aerosol transmission. So there are several things that were mentioned here which remains relevant and very important. One is to limit the laparoscopic procedures to the most proficient surgeons. We don't want to do 4-hour, 6-hour laparoscopic cholecystectomy at this time. We should shorten the amount of time being allotted for each patient, especially if they're COVID, whether they're non-COVID or COVID, just shorten everything. Appropriately sized incisions should be made to prevent leaks. We should keep pneumoperitoneum as low as possible, ideally between 8 to 10, maybe even raise it to 12, but as low as possible, just to have a sufficient pneumoperitoneum, but not to compromise the visualization of the gutters. We should set our electrosurgical units to a minimum. We should keep our instruments blood-free. Minimize changing of instruments. We have to remember that each time we take out an instrument and insert it back, we are leaking a small amount of pneumoperitoneum. Ideally, we should not reuse trocars, and we should not reuse trocar. We should not open trocar valves to evacuate surgical smoke and plume. So it's quite obvious in these drawings, and you can find this drawing in a precision statement. We should use filters when evacuating pneumoperitoneum, and I can elaborate on that a bit more later. And I can elaborate more on the use of appropriate PPEs. One thing I would like to add with regards to our previous position statement is that during intubation and extubation, ideally only the anesthesiologist and our assistants are allowed in the operating room. So the staff, operating room staff, the surgeon, the surgical assistants, the residents should not be in the operating room during intubation and should have gone out and started doffing by the time extubation is going on. We have to remember that during intubation and extubation, these are two procedures which are proven to have a very high aerosol generation. So one thing, or the most important or significant change to our position statement is actually the fact that we will now start to resume doing elective procedures, okay, for presumed COVID negative patients. So we have to understand that what's important when we say we will do elective procedures is the preoperative evaluation, because we have to know if the patients are truly or most probably COVID negative. So what's important is the preoperative evaluation. So as mentioned earlier, RT-PCR, or real-time polymerase chain reaction, is still the gold standard. And ideally, it should be done for all patients prior to surgery. However, we know that it is not readily available. Dr. Art de la Peña mentioned it. There are a lot of limitations to it, from collection of specimen, handling of specimen, the delays, availability of the test. For example, like here in Cebu, there was only one. For a long time, from the start, there was only one laboratory that was doing it, and it was not even approved. We were sending our specimens to Manila. So how sure are we that the specimens that we were sending early on were handled properly? That's the problem, one. Two, now we have, as a hospital, which is a government hospital, not everybody could request for an RT-PCR. It has to go through infectious disease specialist, and the guidelines that they have and indications for us to request for an RT-PCR is very strict. So that's a big problem. Now we're lucky because there's a second hospital, and it's a private hospital, which is willing to perform RT-PCRs for our patients at a decent cost. Okay, so next would be the serological study and rapid test kits. We have to understand that serological test kits and RT-PCR should not be competing with each other. They should be working hand in hand. Okay, they should be working hand in hand. It's not which one is better. If you could do both for any patient, that is the best thing that you could do. Chest X-ray is very important. Now, one thing is each and every single institution ideally should have a checklist, something like this one. So this is a checklist that we have for our institution, and we have to remember, because when you have a checklist, you start with a checklist, then you already know if this patient is, number one, is the procedure that the patient is undergoing is elective or emergency? Is it going to be a COVID positive suspect or not? Does RT-PCR, is it necessary at this time? Do we have to wait for the RT-PCR before doing the surgery? And do we have to do a CT scan? Okay, in the previous position statement, it was mentioned that CT scan is included even for asymptomatic patients. But in a recent publication showing the consensus statement by experts from the Radiological Society of North America, they mentioned that CT screening for the detection of COVID-19 is not recommended by most radiological societies. It was also mentioned by Dr. Art de la Peña that it is not cost effective to do CT scan on all patients undergoing surgery. However, when they mentioned this, they mentioned that because of the volume of the patients that they see, they now know that eventually they might be able, the radiologist might be able to diagnose COVID-19 patients. And the thing that they try to look at most is the peripheral ground glass opacities on patients with COVID-19. So whether these patients are symptomatic or not, they mentioned that sometimes even in asymptomatic patients, they can already see the peripheral ground glass opacity. You have to remember that by the time these patients are symptomatic, at least 50, 60, 70% of the lung capacity is already compromised. With the 30% compromisation of the lung, they might not even have any symptoms. Okay. So do we recommend routine CT scan? Maybe not. So we created this new algorithm for guidelines of for laparoscopy, and I will try to dissect it for you. So I'll cut it into small bits so we can dissect it. So first, there's this statement in the right side: laparoscopy may be performed as long as high-quality surgical management could be assumed. So now we go back that we will assume and we will pray that our surgeons will have good sound judgment for patients, remembering very well that even undergoing, if you do surgery on patients who are COVID positive, there's always a risk that there is a higher morbidity and mortality for these patients. Okay, so we try to avoid those. Even if they're asymptomatic COVID positive and then they undergo surgery, morbidity and mortality is always known to be much higher than a COVID negative. So we mentioned here the pre-op testing. Of course, a checklist is necessary or ideal. Chest X-ray, PA view, rapid test kit, RT-PCR is still ideal, and CT scan will be done as necessary. If the chest X-ray shows some opacity and it has to be confirmed through CT scan, then a CT scan will be performed. So here we divided this into a elective and non-elective. So non-elective cases are those that may not be delayed for more than 14 days, while the elective ones can be delayed for more than 14 days. So example of elective cases which we may start performing at this time based on our guidelines, are thyroid malignancy, non-obstructing colon tumors, adrenal tumors, symptomatic gallbladder stones, jaundice patients without cholangitis or pancreatitis. We can start doing those as of this time. So if we have a, in this algorithm, if we have a non-COVID patients, so if the patients are classified as non-COVID, whether elective or non-elective, they will use a level 3 PPE. For COVID-19 patients, if they are elective, then ideally the procedure should be deferred and the patient is referred to infectious disease specialist. Further testing might be necessary and further management is necessary. For those which are non-elective or emergency cases, then it has to be performed, but performed with utmost caution and using level 4 PPEs. If the surgery will require a prolonged laparoscopy, we would try to consider an alternative procedure. For example, like interventional radiology or endoscopy, or even an open surgery should be performed. So for example, like a patient with cholangitis and common bile duct stone, starting to develop cholangitis or pancreatitis, should you do a laparoscopic cholecystectomy with lap common bile duct exploration? Maybe not. Maybe you could go for a percutaneous cholecystostomy or PTBD or an ERCP. And I'm sure Dr. Sarmiento would say that the ERCP would be the best. For non-COVID patients, both elective and elective can be performed. They will be performed using level 3 PPEs. And these procedures should be based on a prioritization or a protocol plan. So each institution should have a prioritization plan. So whether the asymptomatic or slightly symptomatic gallbladder stones, whether it should go first over the, if you have a long list of procedures to be done, probably you go with the patients with malignancies first rather than those which can be delayed a little bit further. And the elective surgery should depend on the individual institution's capacity, meaning do you have enough hospital beds? Do you have enough supply of PPEs? Because if you have limited amount of PPEs, then probably you just, for now, you defer the elective ones and reserve those for the emergency. Do you have enough staff to, go around? Because we know that with doing surgeries for COVID, some of the staff will naturally be, infected or contaminated, and then they will have to be isolated for 2 weeks. So the amount and the number of staff is also very important. And each and every single institution should take that into consideration. So whether level 3 or level 4 PPEs, ideally they should have at least 2 layers of protection. So this one on the left side is an example of an isolation gown. This one can be used for a level 3. And while this one is called a coverall, then this is used for a level 4. The level 3 and level 4 is based on the PCS, the new PCS guidelines and the categorization, which is actually also based on the CDC categorization or Center for Disease Control in the US, where the term NIOSH is coming from. WHO follows that. There are several donning and doffing techniques. However, if you may, please follow the ones published by WHO, or better yet, follow the one which is being followed by the Center for Disease Control. Now, these two smaller images are actually should be worn underneath a waterproof surgical gown. So now there is this question about using the old fabric OR gowns that we're using. It should be a waterproof OR gown. If we intend to have 2 layers of protection, remember, if you intend to have 2 layers of protection, then the OR gown, which is made up of fabric, may not be necessarily be sufficient for a level 4 PPE. And the use of goggles, okay, so really, this is one thing that I would also like to emphasize, because if you try to read and go through the Center for Disease Control guidelines, eyeglasses are not substitute for goggles. So if they say level 4 PPE, it should be goggles and face shield, or a full face shield. Okay? So one thing that we have to remember, that the risk of infection for healthcare personnel, especially during doffing, is about 29%. So that's the reason why if you have a staff of 20 in the OR, then, or even, after 2 weeks of going on duty, you can expect that 30% of them may be contaminated if they're not properly trained. Shoe covers, this is one more thing. Shoe covers, if you try to take a look at the CDC guidelines, shoe covers, they're not the usual shoe covers that only cover the shoe and expose the ankle. It should be calf or knee-high shoe covers. So these are the things that we have to remember. Now, negative pressure rooms. It has been mentioned, it is very expensive to have an ideal negative pressure rooms. But then they mentioned, why not put exhaust fans? What's important with regards to negative pressure room is if you try to take a look and see the data on when can you consider a pressure room as a negative pressure room, there should be at least 12 air exchanges, at least 12 air exchanges per hour. So how do we do that? You measure the room, you measure the area, width, length, and the height of the room, take in how many cubic meters there is, and expect 12 air exchanges per hour. You could use that, you could do that by using these, I have images here of fans and HEPA filter, okay? So the air that's going into the room to create a negative pressure should be filtered even with just a carbon filter. It doesn't necessarily have to be a HEPA filter, because we're thinking that the air that's coming from outside is relatively COVID-free. However, the air that's going out of the operating room should be sucked out using these fans and filtered through a HEPA filter. And ideally, the HEPA filter should be exposed to a UV light, so that by the time it is replaced, the microorganisms captured in the HEPA filter would have been eliminated or killed. There have been mentioned of earlier by Mrs. Villanueva about using HEPA filters instead of a negative pressure room. Is that ideal? If you can have 20 air exchanges, because if you try to take a look at the commercially available HEPA filters, they have something which is mentioned there, clean air delivery rate, which is measured as cubic meters per hour. If that cubic meters per hour for that particular HEPA filter is 20 times the area of the room, then maybe it is sufficient. But if it's not, then it's not. It's not ideal. Negative pressure rooms. You have to remember that the input, where the air intake is, should be at least 8 meters away from the output. So in some institutions, for example, in Cebu Doctors, what we suggested is to put the air conditioning unit outside or in the hallway, and put the input or the air that's being pumped inside should be in the hallway, while the operating room itself is just sucking out the air. So the air that's going in is the cooled air from the hallway plus the air that's being pumped into the hallway. Now, how can you check this? Ideally, there should be a continuous air pressure monitoring system. That's the most ideal. However, there are several ways to test this one. One is through the smoke test, whether it's using actual smoke, which might not be very safe. Some institutions use powder. They pump in a bit of powder underneath the doors, and if they can see that the powder goes in, then there's a negative pressure. You can use a fogging machine. to see if the fog really goes in. So there are several ways to do this, but if it's not the ideal negative pressure room, then I think each and every single institution should try to make an effort to create a negative pressure room. You have to understand that all aerosol generating procedures, there's always that risk that the aerosol is something that you'll be bringing out, and you would be contaminating the other ORs, the hallways, everything would be contaminated without a proper negative pressure room. Now, with regards to removing pneumoperitoneum, there are several devices available commercially available in the market, which is used to filter the released carbon dioxide. And there are some which have been, as we have this illustration in our new algorithm on how to create or to release the pneumoperitoneum through a filter or through this fluid, which is similar. This device is similar to what we use for a closed tube thoracostomy. And there are several solutions which can be used. Dr. Raymond Ong has his Drago solution, which is, I think, very ingenious. You could use benzene-based, like Lysol. You could use chlorine-based solutions. And what's important is to increase the surface area of the bubbles that's going in. So that's why you could use either a coarse foam or a gauze so that you create smaller bubbles and increase the surface area so that more of the air that comes out or more of the pneumoperitoneum that goes through the fluid is exposed to the solution, to the sterilizing solution. And before it goes to the suction, it should be filtered again. And these filters are disposable and should be discarded after procedure. So then it boils down to this actual algorithm that we have. So if there are questions to this algorithm, I can answer that later. We also have an algorithm so this is the algorithm for laparoscopy, and this is the algorithm for endoscopy. This was made by Dr. Ray Sarmiento and is being used in the Rizal Memorial Medical Center. So what's important here is patients for endoscopy, whether they're for upper GI, biliary, lower GI, there are certain upper GI procedures which should ideally or are considered as emergency procedures and ideally treated through endoscopy. And that includes variceal bleed, non-variceal bleed, caustic ingestion, foreign body ingestion. All of these should be ideally performed through endoscopy. There are biliary procedures or biliary endoscopy procedures which should ideally be performed, and these include severe cholangitis. I think if Dr. Sarmiento would like to speak further on this or have a separate session for this, I think it would also be nice. However, for patients who are COVID positive, there are alternative procedures. Let's say COVID positive in a patient who is, we could do PTBD and avoid a general anesthesia or avoid endoscopy, avoid an aerosol generating procedure. Then that procedure could be performed, or just to delay an aerosol generating procedure. Meaning, for example, if a patient has acute cholangitis, but not so severe, then maybe a PTBD will do. And if the patient recovers after 2 to 3 weeks, then an ERCP could be done to remove the stone, and the patient may undergo a laparoscopic procedure. So these are the two and similarly looking algorithms that we have performed collectively as a board in PALAS. And I would like to thank again everybody for this opportunity to be speaking in front of you.
Okay, thank you very much, Don. Now we go on to the open forum. Joining our panel is our president, Dr. Ernesto Tan. Also, Dr. Alejandro Palines, Dr. Ray Sarmiento, the president of the PCS, Dr. Jose Antonio Salud, and
We have Dr.
past,
Mondivera also here.
yes, Mondevera, and the past president of ELSA, Dr. Alan Benefe. Jeff, can you help me here?
Yeah, we also have Dr. Catherine there together with the panelists as well. So yeah, congratulations, Don. It was a very nice presentation, and it's really needed because there's a lot of surgeons really asking for this. So I was checking the Q&A here, the question and answer, Don. I think there's a question here. Oh no, before we read the question, I think I have a hand raising from Dr. De Vera. Sir?
Okay na ba ako?
Yes, po.
Congratulations doon. Maganda yung lecture mo. Question lang kasi in PGH, we're deciding the algorithm for treating severe cholangitis. Pero doon sa lecture mo, you did not give any definitive algorithm kung ERCP ba or PTBD. Kasi at least I argue kasi doon sa at least sa GS3, sa PGH, kasi ang risk ng ERCP is yung aerosolizing because of the sphincterotomy, di ba? Pero di ba kung cholangitis, hindi ka naman nag-sphincterotomy, basta kung madali insert lang yung catheter, di ba? Through guide wire. So walang aerosolizing. Kasi ang argument namin doon is ERCP ba or PTBD? Kasi at least in our institution, kahit na government yun, mas mahal pa rin yung cost ng PTBD than ERCP. Tsaka mas straightforward ERC kasi pag nakita rin kanila, saksak na kagad, di ba? And at least although both are invasive, but in my mind, mas least invasive ang ERCP. So pwede bang yun ang gawin nating recommended algorithm for severe cholangitis?
Yes, Doc. For severe, I'm sure Dr. Ray Sarmiento will also try to say something about this. But for severe cholangitis, ideal talaga ang ERCP. It's more ideal. Number one, certain advantages. ERCP passes through natural passages. It doesn't create a new passage. It goes through the natural passage, which is the ampulla. We can do a sphincterotomy, we can remove the stone, and we can drain the pus from there. We can get some cultures of the pus. And I know that this can also be done. Cultures of the pus can also be taken with the PTBD. However, the ERCP has this certain advantage that we can just remove the stone, the obstructing stone, with just one go. We don't really need to do just stenting alone. For patients who are really unstable, we can just settle for stenting and just drain. But if we have time or if the patient is stable enough for us to really clear the bile duct, then we can clear the bile duct. And with doing this, we can also prevent further possible pancreatitis, which could happen if the stone could further go down and obstruct the pancreatic duct as well.
Okay. So thank you very much, Don. I think we have a reaction from Dr. Ray Sarmiento. Ray? I'm sorry, we'll unmute you. Nakamute ka, Ray. All right.
Hello. Yes.
Yeah.
Rinig na.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Sir, with regards to ERCP being aerosol AGP procedure, an aerosol generating procedure, it's not the sphincterotomy itself that generates the aerosol. It's the whole endoscopic procedure. Once you put in that scope, if the patient gags, once you put in air, suction air, even the fluids that would come out of the mouth of the patient can all be aerosolized. So in essence, the ERCP procedure in itself is aerosol generating. So it's not the sphincterotomy itself. So the recommendation is if it's really cholangitis, Tokyo guidelines severe, ERCP is the best way to go. It's fast. It's you just put in a stent, then you go out. Of course, you just have to protect all the staff. Ideally, sana po maganda na we have a negative pressure room. If not, probably a laminar room, as mentioned by Dr. Ocampo. That's the least that they can offer for the meantime. And then other levels of cholangitis, like the moderate or the low risk, usually 80% would respond to antibiotics. Then we can tide them over. And then probably do some alternative procedures, because you're putting at risk the healthcare worker or the doctor who do the ERCP. So i-reserve natin siya for the really toxic patient or the real indication for the an aerosol generating procedure.
Okay.
So,
thank
Ray,
you.
you would prefer ERCP over PTBD pag severe cholangitis?
Yes, sir. Mas mabilis po kasi. Well, depende rin, sir, kasi sa skill level or the skills nung gagawa ng PTBD. So, sir, nakalagay sa algorithm. Sa algorithm natin is, if it's not available or if there's failure, then we recommend ERCP. Yeah. But if the ERCP can be done expeditiously, within 30 minutes, 15 to 30 minutes, kung kaya ng 5 minutes, malagay yung stent, then, sir, labas na. That's that would be a better option for the patient, yung ERCP.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much, Ray. There is a question here to Don. I think it's related to the smoke evacuators. What is the evidence that pneumoperitoneum and the surgical smoke are really infectious or infectious? And what are the evidence of efficacy for the modified or innovative smoke evacuators? I think what he means is the one that you presented. So they're asking for the evidence. Go, Don.
In regards to the surgical smoke having, or the plume having, or the pneumoperitoneum, it has been tested, but not for COVID patients. The evidence was gathered from previous SARS patients. So they noticed that in previous studies, the coronavirus, which is also SARS, is also coronavirus, was seen on bloodborne, SARS could be seen on patients, on the pneumoperitoneum of patients. They've seen this in the previous studies. With regards to the effectivity of the evacuation and the ones that we're suggesting, we don't really know. We don't really know. But at least with that, we can minimize the amount of virus that is released to the environment. Now, you have to understand, because we were talking about endoscopy and laparoscopy. Actually, laparoscopy that's why we're thinking about laparoscopy, is actually less aerosol generating compared to an endoscopy. And we don't even know. Sometimes an open surgery can be more aerosol generating than a laparoscopy. So for example, like each time we get that cautery and we apply it to the patient's tissue, it produces plume. That plume is an aerosol generating procedure. And we know that even from SARS alone. Now, that's why, for example, like having to do a mastectomy on a patient with a huge breast might even be more, or we might be releasing more viruses into the environment or to the OR environment compared with a laparoscopy, wherein it's confined. What we're trying to do with the guidelines or the suggestions that we have is to minimize the amount of virus that we are releasing to the environment. Or to at least the OR environment. You have to remember, how is the specimen for COVID-19 collected? It's collected through the nasopharynx. Is it the most efficient way to collect it? Well, it is the most efficient way. Is it the best way? Does it have the highest yield? The answer is no. The highest yield is in the tracheoesophageal or in the bronchial passages. Now, that's the highest yield. And then you can understand when each time an endoscopist does an endoscopy, you're putting on air in the esophageal area, and that air, some of it is actually secretions from the pulmonary, which is actually swallowed into the esophageal area. So just imagine how much viruses is being released with the endoscopy alone. I'm sure the GIs are aware of this. The surgical endoscopists are certainly aware of this. And if there was a way for us to catch the air that's being released through the mouth or leaked through the mouth, and pass it through a filter, then it would be most helpful. But that's what we're trying to do with laparoscopy.
Yeah.
Maybe Dr. Raymond Ong, who was made his dream go solution, would like to say something.
Yeah, Mon. You did design. You made the innovation on this, Mon.
I'm the moderator. I'm the moderator. So
Sige.
anyway, anyway, it's based on the data that the solution can actually destroy or decrease the infectivity of the virus. And we presume that by passing the bubbles or the air and dispersing it to small bubbles, it can help disintegrate that virus. And because of the short time of contact, we added the ULPA filter before it goes out to the vacuum system. So that's why if theoretically, if you look at it, it should be effective. But yes, there's no data yet that telling us that this setup is really effective. So in a way, it will really decrease the chance of contamination in the OR.
Okay. I can see Dr. Benafe was raising his hand. Alan, you have something to add? Alan?
It's just with in connection with the explanation of Don. For SARS-CoV, we still don't have any data. The reason why we're getting we're having reservations on doing the surgery connected with aerosolization in surgery is because of studies before that shows you can have HIV, papillomavirus, herpesvirus in the plume. But then again, there's no data that would support a definite data that would support that this virus can be infective. But then again, it's still better to be safe than sorry. That's why we're at the onset of the pandemic. If you notice, just for safety, the use of laparoscopy is being cautioned by a lot of societies. They just came out with their own guideline. AES, ELSA, and then of course PALES came out with their own guideline, primarily because for the safety of the healthcare workers. But then again, there's no data yet that would show that the SARS-CoV is present in the plume. We all know also that comparing laparoscopy and open surgery, we generate more smoke in laparoscopy. Although, like what Don have said earlier, you need to compare what type of surgeries. Like if you're doing MRM and doing a lot of cauterization in that area, then you produce a lot of plume. We also know that virus is present in the peritoneal fluid. So these are the things that we all know, and as as surgeons, we want to keep the surgical field, and of course, to keep all the healthcare workers within that operating room to be safe, and that's why we're giving out all these recommendations.
Okay. So thank you very much, Alan. There's a question here, Don, and I think Ray can also help answer this. The question is about to what extent is the role of ERCP in delaying the definitive procedure in periampullary tumors? I think it's from Frankie. Don?
Okay. So with regards to periampullary tumors, I think most of the periampullary tumors are best evaluated with a CT scan with contrast. And based on the size, of course, we will try to, based on that, there's what we call as clinical staging. So there's an anatomical staging if the specimen is there, and clinical staging if it's based on CT scan alone. Stage 1, stage 2, based on CT scan is considered as locally advanced, and stage 3, stage 4 based on CT scan if there's already lymph node metastasis, and it's considered as a systemic illness, distant metastasis or even lymph node metastasis for periampullary tumors. Now, the role of ERCP is to prevent the consequences of jaundice and obstructive jaundice, which is associated with periampullary tumors. If it's let's say it's a stage 1 or stage 2 malignancy, and that patient is ideally should undergo surgery and not neoadjuvant chemotherapy. For stage 3 periampullary tumors, it's advocated that the patient undergo neoadjuvant chemotherapy. But for stage 1, stage 2, so that whether even stage 3, stage 4, we still do ERCP to insert a stent. And while the patient is undergoing neoadjuvant chemotherapy, then the stent is there, and the consequences of obstructive jaundice is appeased. So with regards to stage 1, stage 2, then if the patient needs further testing, RT-PCR, or the hospital facilities and staff and everything that deals with the hospital needs to be taken care of, then you can delay the procedure just by having a stent alone.
Okay. So thank you very much, Don.
Mondevera could say something.
Yes. Dr.
Great.
De Vera, can you add some?
Hello.
Yes.
Yung sa periampullary kasi pag the role of ERCP is basically to drain. For example, at this time na you could not do the surgery. Pero yung tamang sinabi ni Don na kailangan malaman ERCP, pag ERC dapat i-CT scan mo to accurately stage. And during this transition period, kung early siya, kasi hindi natin alam yung behavior nung tumor kung makakaabot ba siya when the crisis is over, or could it be done during this transition period. Plus then, of course, for some circumstances, he might require an ICU, blood and everything. So kung kaya na nung capacity. But kung tama yung staging and it's early, maybe pwede pang, in my opinion, pwede pang pagpaliban ng, but how long we can delay, yun ang medyo mahirap i-decide. Pero yung role ng ERCP is particularly useful at this time kasi hindi mo ma-decide kung kailan mo gagawin So once ma-diagnose, stage accurately and then drain, and then decide when it's the most optimum time to do the surgery.
Okay, so thank you very much, Dr. Mondevera.
Yeah.
Just a few questions before we end this. There's a question here. We know that RT-PCR may remain positive long after the patient is clinically recovered up to 30 days of residual antigen. That's the Wuhan experience. So can we use the IgG as test for low infectivity to expedite semi-urgent cases, or better to just wait until the RT-PCR is negative? And a follow-up question with that, should all patients and even the surgeons be tested before doing surgery? So what's the panel member stance on this? So I'll direct this question to Dr. Kathy Rinte and Dr. Salud. So let's see if Kathy is online. Kathy, any thoughts on this question? Kathy is on. Maybe Dr. Salud, sir, are you still around?
Yep, I am here.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to congratulate Pales and Don on the lecture earlier. We fully agree with most of his with all of his recommendations, But I'd just like to add, probably it's always best if in doubt, either don't proceed or wear full PPE, enhanced PPE. That's all I'd like to add.
Can I ask a question for
Okay,
Dr.
thank you very.
Salud?
Yes,
Let me say something
yes.
about the question first.
Okay, before Dr. Palines, yes, Dr. Don, any reaction with Dr. Salud's question?
Yes, with regards to ERCP for periampullary tumors, another advantage of ERCP is we could actually take a tissue diagnosis, which is actually required for patients with advanced malignancy. Usually, the oncologist will ask for a tissue diagnosis, for example, and it depends on what type of periampullary malignancy. Some periampullary malignancies have a higher yield. For example, a cholangiocarcinoma will have a 60 to 70% tissue yield or positivity with regards to brushing compared with pancreatic malignancy. With pancreatic malignancy, if the tumor has not invaded directly into the bile duct, sometimes the yield with brushing or the tissue diagnosis may not necessarily be positive. But for cholangiocarcinoma, the probability of getting a positive tissue diagnosis is higher with the ERCP. With regards to having the virus present in PCR, we have to take everything into consideration. And for example, like a patient who is IgG positive, sometimes would already say, oh, the IgG is already positive, and usually it is seen as early as second or third week after the patient is infected, and we would assume that there is already long-term immunization or from the disease. But then the problem is the antigen could still be present, and that's why, based on the SAGES guidelines, having an IgG is not necessarily enough. It has to be that the patient should be RT-PCR negative before we could say that the patient is COVID negative. And I think that is something that we should have to wait. We know that the longer time that we wait, and even as early as 5 or 6 weeks, the antigen could still be present, whether it is a live antigen or whether it's just fragments of RNA that is there. We don't really know, but maybe the best thing is just to really wait until we get a couple of negative swabs. That's the safest way to go. You have to stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Don. Dr. Palines?
Yeah, this is more of a suggestion rather than a question for Dr. Salud. Now that we have an imminent increase in the hospitalization, laparoscopic or open, does the PCS plan to have talks or negotiations with the PhilHealth so that they could increase the case rate for open or laparoscopic?
We can discuss that with PhilHealth. They know of the concerns of the surgeons regarding the potential for getting infected by the virus, and in fact, there is possibility that they may in fact HMOs as well. They may in fact increase the rates for consultations, for example, and also they may increase the rates for those who are doing surgeries at this time for COVID patients. They mentioned that, but whether it's in clear already in black and white, they have yet to put that in writing. But they have mentioned that they plan to increase the rates during this pandemic, when the problem is no longer as acute as it is right now. They'll probably return. They may return to the regular rates. So as it is right now, we don't really have any confirmation in black and white. But we have another meeting hopefully in the next few weeks with the PhilHealth. Although we meet regularly with PMA and sometimes with the DOH also. We also plan to have a meeting with the HMOs soon, and we can raise that issue, Alex. Thank you.
Thank you, Tito.
Thank you very much. Okay, there's some questions here with regards to resumption of laparoscopic surgery. I'd like to ask some of the panels their stand. Would you think in your own institutions it is now safe to resume laparoscopic surgery with the guidelines that was set by Don? And would you recommend now for elective cases? I'll start with Mon Ong as moderator.
I
In
think
your
there's a
institution.
question. It's really difficult. No, it's really difficult to really start this elective cases since we need to be prepared, and there are also limitations in every hospital, in every institution. So if we recommend something, it has to be applicable to all institutions that are not ideal. So I think that should be answered by our speaker,
Yes.
Don, or from other Alan from the
Yes.
ELSA point of view.
So okay, from let's hear from Dr. Allen from Batangas. Allen.
Yeah. I'm doing Colis in my center in Batangas. I think if you look on the recommendation of ELSA, owing to the fact that Asia, kasi di ba, ELSA represents the Asian countries, and owing to the fact that in Asia we have a different plethora of countries with different socioeconomic background, and then of course the different responses that are noted across Asia. Some would have a high incidence of COVID cases. Some countries would have low incidences of cases, and then some countries are quite rich, like Korea, China, Hong Kong, Singapore. So these are the things that we're trying to take into consideration before coming up with a recommendation. As early as February, I think midweek of February, centers were chosen were Hong Kong, China, Singapore, Bangladesh, and some countries that are would be at least would represent what Asia is. And of course, the resources of different countries.
Yes.
So the question will always be: are we prepared to go back to surgery?
Yes.
I think the best way to answer it is, if you look on the community numbers of COVID patients, and then you try to taper down or to classify what type of surgical management that you can do in each active community, or if you have a community that has high number of COVID patients or limited number, isolated number, and then if you don't have any cases anymore, and then you come up with different strategies or different recommendations for each one, because each country would be different. Parang Pilipinas, ibang-iba sa Thailand. If you look on Hong Kong, the nice thing about it is, just last week during the UMIST conference, we have a guest from Shenzhen, which is one of the hospitals in China that taking care of COVID patients. One from Hong Kong and one from Norway. And the responses of each will be different. Ano ba yung meron ka sa community mo? In the same way, in the Philippines, iba yung response ng Metro Manila. Tulad nga sinabi ni Dr. De La Peña kanina, ang center of the pandemic in the Philippines is NCR. Totally different kung if you compare now the recommendations for surgery if you're doing it in a low, yung pinakamababa, kunyari, Coron, or punta ka ng Palawan, mababa yung cases nila, that would be different. But then again, if you would look on how we would come in, take a look on ano yung status ng hospital mo. The hospital is taking care of a lot. Majority of your patients now are COVID. Then you need to take care of, mukhang, di ba? You don't want to go into elective surgeries right away in the hospital. Ang difference actually for each country would be, like the one in China and in Hong Kong, may designated na hospital for COVID patients. And other hospitals that are not designated cannot admit even for suspect COVID patients. So definitely these hospitals can do, they haven't stopped doing elective surgeries. Hong Kong haven't stopped, Shenzhen haven't stopped.
Yes.
In hospitals that are admitting COVID, definitely no elective surgeries in those hospitals. So totally different from each site. So
That's right.
if you look on the recommendations of ELSA, which was published in the surgical endoscopy, lahat ng elements, lahat ng pandemic response state of each either country or each center, you need to take into consideration the number of COVID patient positive that you have. I think
Okay.
that's how you need to look at it.
Yes, thank you very much, Alan. So, as Mon has mentioned, it's difficult to make a general recommendation, and as you mentioned also, Alan, it has to be taken into account your own area or your own hospital's condition as well. So let's hear from Cebu. In Cebu, Don, your place is also one of the hot zones, Region 7. So are you already resuming your laparoscopic or elective surgeries for laparoscopic surgery?
So far, I've done a few laparoscopic procedures, but most of the patients, or almost all of the patients that I've done laparoscopic procedures for, have undergone RT-PCR. And they're actually patients who've had cholangitis. We tested them completely just to make sure. And actually, in some cases, I had to wait for 4 days, and in one patient, 5 days to get the results. And in this time, since the patient is placed inside together with the, suspected COVID patients, we are very wary that, they could have contracted the disease from waiting in that area. And this is, I think, what Dr. Art de la Peña mentioned earlier. During the time that they were waiting, is it, could have they contracted the disease? So this is the reason for the recommendation that the minimum is level 3 PPE. And even if it's like COVID negative already, we still have to go for level 3 PPE because we have to protect ourselves. And we have 2 layers of protection no matter what. And we really cannot be so complacent about things. I would totally agree with everything that Dr. Alan Bonafé has mentioned. Hi, Kuya. And with regards to, each and every single institution, each and every single place will be totally different. I guess that, or everybody knows that Cebu is also a hotspot. Actually, today I scheduled an ERCP thinking that we would finish early. I scheduled an ERCP at 3:30 p.m. of a patient who underwent open cholecystectomy and common bile duct exploration 3 weeks ago for cholangitis, and then developed jaundice just about a week ago. And the patient has jaundice, not in cholangitis, but jaundice. And then this patient, actually, yesterday, I requested, because it's hard to request for an RT-PCR, I'm just trying to share this case with you. I requested for a rapid test, and the patient is IgM positive and IgG negative. So, obviously, I deferred the procedure. Patient is jaundice, not in cholangitis. We could just give antibiotic, and maybe we'll do an RT-PCR, and if he's negative in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and we can do the procedure for him. But it's a retained stone. See, and these things, we really have to take into consideration. This patient is coming from Liloan. It's north of Cebu. It's not coming from one of the hotspots, because if you try to take a look at the census now in the Philippines, the top 2 barangays with the most number of COVID cases, both are in Cebu. That's Mambaling and Kalunasan. They have the most number of cases in terms of barangay. And I mean, you could expect, probably, that's a big squatters area, and probably a lot of them are already infected. It would be nice if we had, I think Dr. Bobby Bandolon already left, but I believe Davao has segregated and assigned a specific or 2 specific hospitals specifically for COVID, and they have been continuously doing elective cases in their area.
Yeah. Thank you, Don. Yes, Alan, just to add, then we'll go to Ray after
take
this.
note of the physical setup of your OR. In a lot of our hospitals, especially the provinces, it's confined in a small space. So the entry and the exit is just one, isang alleyway, di ba? And then you have to think of if you're doing your suspect COVID and then you mix it with a non-COVID patient, then suddenly your suspect COVID patient becomes positive. So all throughout from the entrance of your alleyway and then to each of the rooms that that you have your ORs would always be infected, considered as an infective area. So these are the things that you need to look at. That's the reason why in our hospital in Batangas, we have 2 separate ORs. So we designated the DR as a COVID, suspect COVID OR, and then the MIS OR on the left side is just for the clean OR.
Yeah, I've seen the OR, Alan. But you see, the problem there is actually in the Philippines, most of the ORs in the Philippines are still really limited in the resources. And that's why they're really struggling on how to, we're putting out guidelines and yet they cannot meet the guidelines. And how are they going to take care of the patients? Let's see, Ray, you were raising your hands. Yeah, unmute.
Okay. Yes. No questions from here, but there are questions from the Q&A board with regards to, I'll throw this question back to Dr. Rosello. With regards to, there's a question here that who recommends minimum level 3 PPE for COVID-19, and the hazmat suits or the level 4 PPEs that we recommend are for a different type of virus or the Ebola virus. So kung COVID positive ba, do we recommend a level 3 minimum or we recommend strictly the coverall or the hazmat type of PPE?
Okay, so for the level, you have to understand that we are recommending the level 4 because these are all aerosol generating procedures. These are all aerosol generating procedures. You have to understand, ideally no skin is exposed because you're gonna go home with, even if I don't even believe the face shield and, without the goggles, they're not enough. Level 3 PPE is not enough. And then you try to take a look at the CDC guidelines. I mean, we have to be very careful. Can I say something? I don't know if somebody will react, If you try to take a look at what's recommended and see the doffing that DOH does, the first thing that they want us to remove is the goggles and the face shield. That's the second thing. The first thing is the shoe covers. This doesn't even follow with the CDC guidelines. For example, for myself, I work with the Emergency Rescue Unit Foundation, and we do a lot of these things. Emergency Rescue Unit Foundation has been evaluated by people from Netherlands and by the US on how we do things. They call this hazmat suits and everything. These are called coveralls. And for us, these are just level C outfits. Level C. This is not even close. This is just for biological. And biological, and then there's a chemical biological, and there is even a nuclear, which is what we call as a level A. And these things, we're very strict with how we do donning, doffing. Right now, for example, like Aeroof is transporting patients, COVID positive patients. And if we follow based on the hazmat protocol that we do, these are biological agents. And these biological agents should be treated with a complete coverall or a level C. Okay. Sometimes we are called, or Aeroof is called to transport as much as 12 patients per night to get these patients from the barangays and transport them to, some center or towards the hospital. Did you know that our paramedics, we ask them to practice 2 hours before they're supposed to transport, practice donning and doffing again and again. And as spotter, we try to look at them. If they fail in one, they're not gonna go.
Yeah, that's
have to be very, very, very careful.
Thank you, Don. And it's really quite challenging in these challenging times, you know. And we as surgeons, and some of you are leaders and admins as well, still really learning even today. And even Dr. Salud, our PCS president, is also learning from all your comments and suggestions. So I believe we should not stop sharing our experiences. We should not stop discussing this, because we learn from this. And before we close, before I turn back to Dr. Mon, may I ask Dr. Salud for any uh, message, sir, from PCS and closing, then I'll press back to Mon.
Um, Here in the panel, I'm the least expert among the panelists when it comes to these things. And yes, I agree, we are all learning as the days progress. And it's very important that we continue to listen in and join such webinars. We will be able to learn a lot and apply that in our practice. Just to give you some reminders only, we have another webinar tomorrow, and this time it's for the PCS PANSI on thyroid surgeries. And I'd like to remind also the fellows and the resident members and all those who are interested that we will have our 46th Mid-Year Convention, PCS Mid-Year Convention online next Thursday and Friday, May 28 and 29. So I'm sure hindi lang tayo salita ng salita, no? May ginagawa rin tayo. So I believe that we will be able to do much more than what we are just discussing now. So thank you very much to the Palace for this activity, and more power to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mon.
Jeff, may
Yes.
comment ka si Ray Sarmiento.
Yes. Ray?
Last na lang. Meron kasing comment si Dr. Arcilia dito. I believe dun sa sinabi ni Dr. Arcilia, if your center, as mentioned by Dr. Benafe, if your center, depende sa locality mo, it depends on the technology that you have, the locality, the expertise within the area, the levels of engineering that your institution has. We are all still general surgeons, and then we can still do our surgeries open, di ba? If there are questions with regards to doing something, a procedure laparoscopic, and then your system is not okay, then we are still able to do the surgery open. That's the minimum training that we all have. We are all general surgeons. So if the patient needs surgery and laparoscopy, ideally can be done to this patient, but your system or everything within the area or within your community is not still ideal or may not be able to support you, then still open surgery is still there for you to be able to deliver quality care. It doesn't mean na open surgery siya, hindi quality yung care na binibigay mo sa kanya.
Yeah.
Because it does not make us nga a lesser surgeon if you're not going to do laparoscopic surgery sa kanya.
Thank you, Mon. Thank you, Ray. And before we end, I'll just pass to Mon. And some announcement, please, to all Palace members, please update your emails, because we'll be giving you or sending you an email with regards to our annual Palace convention for the announcement. So Mon, thank you very
Yes.
much, and back to you.
Okay, before we call our sponsor, may I ask Dr. Ernesto Tan to give us his comments on this guideline? Sir, paki-unmute po. Sir, paki-unmute.
Yeah.
Yes, okay po.
Sorry.
Okay na, sir.
Congratulations to everyone, especially to Don, for a very clear and informative presentation, Don. For the information of the audience, these guidelines and infographic will be submitted to PJSS for publication. But you have the first-hand information from them, the step-by-step information regarding the infographic. So with that, congratulations, everyone.
Thank you, sir. Now, may I call on our sponsor from J&J, Miss Rain Cancho, the Key Account Manager for J&J. Rain, you have the mic. Yes, okay.
Good afternoon, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Johnson & Johnson, we would like to thank the officers and the board of directors of Palace, headed by its president, Dr. Ernesto Tan. Thank you for making J&J your partner for today's event. Our sincerest thank you also to our distinguished speakers and panelists. To Dr. Art de la Peña, it's truly an honor for us to have him today, and we thank him for accepting our invitation despite his very busy schedule, and for imparting his knowledge and expertise so that many will be able to learn from the best practices they have started to implement at St. Luke's Medical Center. To Dr. Imelda Mateo, the presentation on compliance and preparedness in accordance to the national directives is truly insightful, not only to the government institutions, but for the private hospitals as well. Thank you, ma'am. To Ma'am Vicky Villanueva for a great presentation on the guidelines for OR infection control, and for reiterating that infection control interventions are equally important for containing surgery-related infections, especially during this time of the pandemic. To Dr. Orlando Ocampo, thank you po for sharing your first-hand experience in PGH, especially during the onset of COVID-19. Your valuable insights on this matter will definitely help your colleagues in other institutions gain a better understanding of what else we should all be prepared for. And to the organizing committee, TNP, Dr. Jeff Domino, Dr. Raymond Ong, Dr. Ike Mendoza, Dr. Ray Sarmiento, Palace Secretariat, Ms. Cherry, and Ms. May Maniega from the Office of the President, St. Luke's Medical Center, our internal J&J team, Carol, Chris, Jet, Mia, and Nico. Thank you, everyone, for your generous gift of time and commitment for us to be able to have a very successful event. And to all the participants we have online, thank you for joining us. We hope you were able to get the most valuable information needed through the very informative lectures. And last but not the least, Johnson & Johnson would like to take this opportunity to thank all of our doctors, nurses, and other healthcare workers who continue to risk their lives and be in the front lines. Thank you for crossing the bridge for all of us so that the Filipinos will be able to witness a brighter tomorrow. May the Almighty God bless us all. Keep safe, everyone, and maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Rain. To all our panelists, thank you very much po. Stay safe. Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Juvie. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tan, Dr. Palines. Thank you,
Salamat
Allen.
po.
Thank you, Dr. De Vera. Thank you, Ray. Thank
Thank
you, Mon. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, Carol. Thank you.
Babuy.
Salamat. Bye-bye.
Kuya Jobs, nakatingin ka sa side. Meron kang screen, no? Juby.
Ayan, stop recording na.
Meron kasing monitor sa kaliwa. Doon ako nakasunod.
Naka-screen ka, no? Kanina nakagalit. Nasa video nakagalit. Para tuloy di ka nakikinig. Bye-bye.
Meron kaming may pa-webinar si Dr. Benafe mamayang hapon.
Ang nga pala, TikTok lang kami. Gusto yung sumama?
Alam mo, magandang webinar, kuya. Yung nag-webinar ka, tapos bibigla kami may natanggap galing kay Dr. Benafe. Wow, galing kay Dr. Ray. Yung ganong webinar ba naman? Okay ba, kuya?
Kuya, mamaya mag-webinar tayo. Ano yun conference lang ng UMIST. Pero may mga international. Meron conference mamaya ang UMIST. Kasi ang nagle-lecture yung mga fellows. Tapos may mga speakers kami na foreigners. gusto nyo, uratin nyo lang yung mga fellow. Asan namin yung link? Asan yung link, Ray? Wala pa sa atin yung link, no? Nasend na ba yung link? Isend nga natin sa
Doon sa Unified.
Ipapahanap ko sa sa papapadala. Sorry.
Ay, alam mo, isend nga doon sa Unified, baka gusto sumali ng iba. Next week, maganda eh. Kasi yung umuo na sila, hanap lang tayo ng date.
Nakita niyo na ba si Wolverine?
Ayun, nasa taas. Si Don Roselio.
Cebu.
Hindi Wolverine yan. Wolverine. Bisaya eh. Sino ka? Ako si Wolverine.
Diba, Sir John, dating Sir John, barber. Meron nga akong slide, hindi ko nila nilabas.
Na.
Kaya mo to.
Bye-bye.
Alright, bye-bye kuya. Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Close na namin to. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, kuya. Thank you.